The maintenance request came through at the worst possible time. David Reed had his hands buried in a cooling unit when his communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Administrator Harris. He wiped the grease from his fingers and read the words twice to make sure he understood correctly. They wanted him to take care of a child. Not just any child, but a dragon girl who had survived something terrible. He found Harris waiting outside the medical bay with a worried expression. The administrator was a tall woman who rarely showed emotion, but today her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. She hasn't spoken since we pulled her from the escape pod 3 weeks ago, Harris explained quietly. The xenopsychologist says she needs stability, someone patient. Your name came up. David wanted to ask why him. He fixed broken machines, not broken lives. But something in Harris's eyes stopped the question before it formed. He simply nodded and followed her inside. The medical bay felt too bright, too sterile. In the farthest corner, pressed against the wall where the temperature dropped lowest, sat a small figure wrapped in thermal blankets. Only her face showed, pale purple scales catching the harsh lighting. Her eyes were too large, too haunted for someone so young. This is Shira, Harris said softly. Shira, this is David. He's going to stay with you for a while. The girl didn't respond. She stared at David with an expression that made his chest ache. He had seen that look before, years ago, reflected in his own mirror after the transport accident that took his daughter. The medical officer approached with a datapad, speaking in low tones. Colony Transport Meridian suffered catastrophic engine failure. Fire spread through 3 sections before emergency systems engaged. Shira was in an escape pod, watching through the viewport when the officer trailed off, glancing at the small dragon girl. She's the only survivor from her family unit. 2 parents, 3 siblings, all lost. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked at Shira again and understood why she chose the coldest corner, why she wrapped herself so tightly despite the blankets doing little good for a species that needed warmth. Dragons require heat to digest properly, the medical officer continued. Her scales are dulling from lack of warmth exposure. But any attempt to raise the temperature causes severe panic responses. We've modified quarters for you both. Temperature controls removed. Ambient kept at 15 degrees. 15 degrees Celsius. David suppressed a shiver just thinking about it. They moved Shira to the new quarters an hour later. The room felt like a refrigerator. David's breath came out in small clouds as he set down his belongings. Shira immediately found the coldest spot near the air vent and curled into a tight ball. Wings wrapped around herself protectively as he pulled on a second jacket and sat across the room, giving her space. His fingers already felt numb. This was going to be a long assignment. Days blended together in the cold. David went about his maintenance duties while Shira remained in the quarters, barely moving except to drink water. She wouldn't eat. The medical officer warned that her condition was deteriorating, that dragons needed warmth the way humans needed oxygen. But every attempt to introduce even mild heat sent her scrambling away in terror. On the 5th day, David tried something different. Instead of sitting in silence, he started talking, not to her directly, but aloud, as if recording logs for himself. Repaired the water recycler in Section C today, he said while preparing his cold rations. Anderson still can't figure out why the seals keep failing. I told him it's because he over-tightens everything. Some systems need room to breathe. Shira's eyes tracked him from across the room, but she made no sound. He continued this pattern every evening, talking about ordinary things, about repairs and recycling systems, and how the station's artificial gravity felt different than planetary pull. He mentioned Earth sometimes, described seasons and weather patterns. The way summer sun fell on Skin Point 2 weeks in, something changed. David was explaining how coffee tasted better when made with fresh water instead of recycled, when he noticed Shira's head had lifted slightly. She was listening, really listening, that he kept talking, careful not to acknowledge the shift too directly. My daughter used to say hot chocolate was better than coffee. She was right, but don't tell anyone I admitted that. A small sound escaped Shira's throat. Not words, but the first vocalization since she arrived. David's heart jumped. but he forced himself to continue normally. She liked marshmallows in hers. The real kind, not synthetic. Those are hard to find on stations like this. The next day, David brought a datapad to the quarters. He sat on the floor between them, closer to her side than his. "If you want to say anything," he said quietly, "you can type it here. Or not. Whatever feels right." He left for his shift. When he returned 6 hours later, the datapad had moved. It sat near Shira's corner, and a single sentence glowed on the screen. "Why aren't you scared of me?" David sat down slowly, considering his answer carefully. He typed his response and slid the datapad back. "Because being different doesn't make someone dangerous. I've worked with 17 species on this station. We're all different. That's what makes things interesting." The datapad came back an hour later. "I'm supposed to breathe fire. Dragons do that. But I can't. I'm broken." David's throat tightened. He typed carefully. "You're not broken. You're hurt. There's a difference. Broken things can't heal. Hurt things can, with time and help." Shira didn't respond again that night, but she moved slightly closer to the center of the room, just a few inches, barely noticeable. But David noticed that he pulled his jacket tighter and smiled despite the cold. Progress came in small moments. 3 weeks into their arrangement, David woke to find Shira sitting at the window instead of her usual corner. The change was small but significant. She watched the distant stars with an intensity that suggested she was looking for something specific. He approached slowly, making his footsteps deliberately audible. The last thing he wanted was to startle her. When he stood beside the window, maintaining careful distance, she glanced up briefly before returning her gaze to the viewport. David followed her line of sight. "See something interesting out there?" For a long moment, nothing. Then Shira raised one hand and pointed to a cluster of stars in the lower quadrant. Her claw tapped the reinforced glass twice, marking a specific constellation. "That's where you're from," David said softly. Not a question. Shira's hand dropped, but she nodded. A single tear tracked down her scaled cheek, catching the starlight. David wanted to say something comforting, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he simply stood with her, sharing the silence and the view. After several minutes, he noticed her shivering despite the cold being her preferred temperature. Dragons needed warmth. Her body knew this, even if her mind couldn't accept it. The datapad had become their primary means of communication. Each day brought new exchanges, small conversations that revealed more about the frightened girl hiding beneath the trauma. She asked questions about Earth, about human customs, about why David chose to work on a remote mining station instead of somewhere more comfortable. "It's quiet here," he typed one evening. "After my daughter died, I needed quiet." "What was her name?" Shira's response came quickly. "Rachel. She was 8 when the accident happened. Transport malfunction, not unlike what happened to your ship. Different cause, same result. Do you still miss her?" David stared at the question for a long time before answering. "Every day. But missing someone isn't the same as being stuck in the moment you lost them. It took me years to learn the difference." The datapad sat untouched for an hour. When it finally moved, Shira had written, "How did you learn?" "By letting other people help me. By accepting that surviving didn't mean forgetting. By understanding that Rachel would want me to keep living." No response came that night, but the next morning, David found Shira had moved her sleeping area closer to where he slept, still maintaining distance, but less than before. The station cafeteria presented a new challenge. Shira had been surviving on food delivered to the quarters, but the medical officer insisted she needed to start socializing. David agreed to take her during off-peak hours when fewer people would be present. The walk through the corridors felt endless. Shira pressed close to the walls, making herself as small as possible. Several workers stopped to stare as they passed. A Centauran couple whispered to each other, their eyes following the young dragon with obvious concern. David positioned himself between Shira and the onlookers, his body language calm but protective. When they reached the cafeteria, he chose a table in the corner, giving her the seat against the wall where she could observe without feeling exposed. "You don't have to eat much," he said quietly. "Just sitting here is enough for today." Shira's claws tapped nervously on the table surface. Her eyes darted around the room, cataloging exits and potential threats. When a food service worker approached to take their order, she flinched hard enough to knock over a water glass. The worker, a kind Delphinian with soft blue skin, quickly cleaned up the spill without comment. "No worries, happens all the time. What can I get you both?" David ordered for them both, keeping his voice steady and normal. Shira watched the exchange carefully, noting how the worker treated her no differently than any other patron. Small victories. David's work schedule meant Shira spent hours alone in the quarters. He hated leaving her, but station maintenance required his attention. Cooling systems needed constant monitoring, power relays demanded regular inspection, and the heating units. He paused mid-thought, considering the irony. His entire job revolved around the systems Shira feared most. One afternoon, he decided to share this with her. He brought his toolkit back to the quarters and spread the equipment on the floor, each tool laid out carefully. "This is a thermal regulator," he explained, pointing to a handheld device. "It measures temperature in systems and helps balance heat distribution. This one checks electrical loads. This calibrates pressure valves." Shira watched from her corner, curiosity overriding caution for the moment. "I spend my days working with heat, with fire suppression systems, with all the things that scare you. But these tools help me control those forces. They turn something dangerous into something useful." He set down a small diagnostic scanner. "Your fire will be like this someday. Something you control, not something that controls you. What if I can't?" The datapad message appeared quickly. "Then we figure out together. But I don't think that's going to happen. You're stronger than you realize." "I don't feel strong. I feel broken and scared all the time." David picked up the datapad and typed slowly. "Strength isn't about not feeling scared. It's about doing things even when you're terrified. You walk to the cafeteria today. You sit here while I explain my work. You get up every morning despite carrying memories that would crush most people. That's strength, Shira. Real strength." The datapad was silent for a while. "Then, my parents used to say dragons are brave. But I don't think they'd think I'm brave now. I think they'd be amazed at how hard you're fighting to survive. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." That evening, Shira asked to see the toolkit again. She didn't touch anything, just observe as David explained each tool's purpose and function. When he mentioned the thermal regulator could measure her internal temperature, she hesitated, then nodded permission. The reading showed her core temperature was dangerously low for a dragon her age. Her body was compensating, but not well. She needed warmth soon or risk permanent damage to her development. David didn't tell her the numbers. Instead, he simply said, "We'll work on it. Small steps." Before sleep, Shira typed one more message. "Thank you for not giving up on me." David responded immediately, "Never going to happen." The greenhouse occupied an entire section on the station's lower level. David had worked there occasionally, maintaining the climate systems that kept Earth plants thriving in artificial conditions. He'd avoided the space since Rachel's death because his daughter had loved gardens, but now it seemed like exactly what Shira needed. The walk down took 15 minutes. Shira stayed close to David's side, her breathing quick and shallow as they descended through progressively warmer corridors. By the time they reached the greenhouse entrance, small wisps of smoke curled from her nostrils, an involuntary stress response. "We can turn back," David offered. "No pressure." Shira shook her head firmly. She typed earlier that she wanted to try, that staying cold forever wasn't living, just existing. Her courage impressed him more than she probably knew. The greenhouse door opened with a soft hiss. Warm, humid air rolled out, carrying scents of soil and growing things. Shira froze at the threshold, every muscle tensing. "Just the doorway," David said quietly. "We don't have to go inside." But Shira's eyes had found something. Past the initial rows of vegetables, a section dedicated to flowering plants created splashes of color. She took one step forward, then another. The warmth washed over her scales, making them shimmer in ways they hadn't since arriving on the station. David followed, letting her set the pace. They moved slowly down the main path, Shira's head turning to take in everything. When they reached the flower section, she stopped completely. A small earth rose, red as fresh blood, bloomed under a carefully positioned grow light. She stared at it for a long time. Then her claw reached out, stopping just short of touching the petals. David noticed her hand was shaking. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "Roses need specific temperatures to thrive. Too cold, and they won't bloom. Too hot, and they burn. But at the right warmth, they create something amazing." Shira pulled her hand back and grabbed the datapad from her supply bag. "Fire killed my family. How can warmth be good?" David considered his answer carefully. Fire without control is destruction, but controlled warmth is life. Look around this room. Every plant here needs heat to grow. The difference is intention and balance. He walked to a nearby seedling tray where tiny green shoots pushed through dark soil. These tomatoes were planted 5 days ago. The heat lamp gives them exactly what they need. Not too much, not too little. That same careful control exists in you, Shira. Your fire is meant to be guided by your mind, not by fear. What if I can't guide it? What if it just destroys things? Then we practice until you can. Nobody expects you to master this immediately. Dragon younglings spend years learning fire control with their parents' help. You didn't get that chance, but you have me. And I'm stubborn enough to stick with you through however long it takes. They spent an hour in the greenhouse that first day. Shira gradually relaxed enough to sit on a bench near the tomato seedlings. She watched the grow lamp with wary attention, but didn't flee. When a timer activated and the lamp brightened slightly, she tensed but held her ground. "See," David said, "the plants aren't afraid. They know warmth helps them grow stronger." The comparison seemed to reach something in her. That evening, back in the cold quarters, she typed, "Can we go to the greenhouse again tomorrow?" David smiled. "Absolutely." The visits became routine. Each day, Shira tolerated the warmth a little longer. She began asking questions about the plants, about growing cycles and seasons. David explained Earth's climate, how summer brought warmth that didn't destroy, but instead encouraged life to flourish. Dragons have a similar concept, he said after researching her species' culture. Fire season, when young dragons first develop their abilities. It's celebrated as a time of growth, not feared as dangerous. My fire season was supposed to happen soon. Shira's typing came slowly, but I don't think it will now. I'm too scared. Fear doesn't stop biology. Your body wants to develop properly. We just need to help your mind accept what your body already knows it needs. On the 8th greenhouse visit, something shifted. Shira reached out and placed her palm directly on the soil warmed by the heat lamp. Her scales absorbed the temperature, a slight glow beginning beneath the surface. For 3 seconds, she held contact. Then she pulled back, breathing hard but not panicking. "That was incredible," David said. "How did it feel?" The datapad response took a while. "Warm, but not burning, not destroying, just warm." Progress accelerated after that breakthrough. Shira started requesting warmer water for drinking. She sat closer to the heat lamps in the greenhouse. Her scales brightened, colors deepening to rich purple with silver highlights. The medical officer reported improved digestion and healthy weight gain, but Administrator Harris brought troubling news during a private meeting with David. The station board is concerned about a dragon who can't control her abilities. They're suggesting transfer to a specialized facility on a core world. "She's making progress," David argued. "Transfer her now could destroy everything we've built." "I know. I'm on your side. But I need you to show measurable results within 2 weeks, or the decision gets taken out of my hands." David returned to the quarters with a heavy heart. Shira noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" Appeared on the datapad. He explained the situation honestly. Shira listened, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she typed rapidly. "I don't want to leave. I don't want to go somewhere cold and clinical where nobody knows me. I want to stay with you. Then we'll make sure you can. We'll show them you're learning, that you're safe. But what if I'm not? What if my fire comes and I can't control it?" David knelt down so they were eye level. "Then we handle it together. But I believe you're ready for the next step. Your body is healing. Your mind is stronger than you think. It's time to stop just accepting warmth and start learning what you can do with it." Shira stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay, teach me about fire." David spent 3 days researching dragon fire development. The station's cultural database contained detailed information from dragon colonies, including traditional teaching methods passed down through generations. He learned that fire control came not from suppressing the ability, but from understanding it as an extension of self. He converted a small storage room into a practice space. The walls were lined with fire-resistant panels, and he installed multiple extinguishing systems as backup. When everything was ready, he brought Shira to see it. She stood in the doorway, examining the room with cautious eyes. "This is for me. This is for us," David corrected. "We'll learn together." The first exercise seemed simple, but proved challenging. David asked Shira to breathe out while imagining warmth gathering in her chest. Not fire, just heat. A warm summer breeze, the comfortable temperature of the greenhouse. Shira closed her eyes and tried. Her breathing quickened. Small wisps of smoke appeared, but nothing more. She tried again and again, frustration building with each failure. "I can't do it. It won't come." Because you're thinking about what you're afraid of instead of what you want to create. Let's try something different. Remember the rose in the greenhouse? Think about that. Think about the warmth that helps it bloom. This time, when Shira exhaled, warm air flowed out. No smoke, no flame, just heated breath. Her eyes opened wide in surprise. "You did it," David said, grinning. "That's the foundation. Heat under your control." They practiced for 20 minutes. By the end, Shira could produce warm breath consistently. The achievement was small but significant. She was directing her internal fire, not letting fear control it. The next day, they attempted actual flame. David set up a metal basin and asked her to try producing a single small flame, just a flicker directed into the safe container. Shira's first attempts produced nothing. Then too much. A burst of fire shot out, hitting the basin and scorching the metal. She jerked back, eyes wide with terror, smoke pouring from her nostrils as panic took over. "It's okay," David said calmly. "That's why we practice here. Look, a basin contained it. Nothing was hurt, but I couldn't control it. It just came out too strong, because you're still associating fire with loss of control. We need to change that association. Close your eyes." Shira obeyed, though her whole body remained tense. Think about the greenhouse. Think about the grow lamp warming the seedlings. That lamp doesn't blast heat everywhere. It provides exactly what's needed. Your fire can be the same. Steady, careful, helpful. They tried again. This time, a small flame appeared in the basin, no bigger than a candle. It lasted 3 seconds before Shira's concentration broke and it extinguished. "Perfect," David said. "That's exactly what we're working toward." Over the following days, Shira's control improved incrementally. She could produce small flames on command and extinguish them intentionally. The practice sessions exhausted her, but she never asked to stop. The 2-week deadline loomed closer each day. On day 9, disaster struck. They were practicing flame duration when Shira's concentration slipped. The flame jumped from the basin toward a wall panel. David's jacket, hanging on a nearby hook, caught fire. He reacted instantly, grabbing an extinguisher and putting it out. The jacket was ruined, and his sleeve showed a minor burn where he'd grabbed the smoldering fabric. Shira made a sound he'd never heard before, a keening wail of distress. She backed into the corner, claws scraping at the walls, eyes wild with panic. Smoke billowed from her mouth and nostrils uncontrollably. "Shira, stop," David said firmly. "Look at me." She couldn't. Her mind had gone to that terrible place where the colony transport burned and her family died. David recognized the signs of a complete trauma response. He approached slowly, hands visible, movements calm. "Shira, the fire is out. Look, it's out. You made a mistake, and we handled it. That's why we practice here. I hurt you." The words came out as a choked sob, the first time she'd spoken aloud since arriving on the station. David held up his arm, showing the minor burn. "This is small. It'll heal in a few days. You didn't mean to do it, and we have safety equipment for exactly these situations. This doesn't change anything." "Yes, it does. I am dangerous. They're right to want to send me away." "No." David's voice was quiet but absolutely firm. "You're learning. Learning means mistakes happen. If I gave up on every student who made an error, nothing would ever get fixed on this station. He sat down on the floor, putting himself at her level. When I was learning station maintenance, I once caused a coolant leak that flooded an entire section. 3 people had to evacuate. I felt horrible, but my supervisor didn't fire me. He explained what went wrong and had me practice until I understood the system better. That's what we're doing here. Shira's breathing slowly steadied. The smoke stopped pouring from her nostrils. She stared at David's burned sleeve with tears streaming down her scaled face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't mean you give up. It means you try harder to improve. Now come here. Sit down. Let's talk about what happened and how we adjust the training. Reluctantly, Shira moved from the corner and sat across from David. He pulled off the damaged jacket, revealing the burn underneath. It looked worse than it was, already treated with basic first aid. Fire responds to emotion, he explained. When you got startled, your emotional state spiked and the fire responded. We need to practice emotional regulation alongside flame control. They work together. What if I hurt someone worse next time? Then we make sure there isn't a next time by preparing better. But I'm not afraid of you, Shira. I'm not going to stop helping you just because there's risk involved. You're worth the risk. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, why? Because you remind me that fear doesn't have to win. You get up every day and face the thing that terrifies you most. That's courage. That's worth supporting. Shira wiped her eyes. Can we try again tomorrow? David smiled despite the throbbing in his arm. Absolutely. The demonstration was scheduled for 1,400 hours in the main assembly hall. Administrator Harris had arranged for a limited audience, mostly station leadership and medical personnel. David appreciated her effort to keep the pressure manageable, but he could see the tension in Shira's posture as they prepared. Remember, he said, checking the equipment one final time. We're not trying to impress anyone. We're just showing them what you can already do. Small controlled flame, hold it for 5 seconds, extinguish on command. That's all. Shira nodded, but her claws kept tapping anxiously against the datapad. She'd been practicing the exact sequence for 3 days straight. Her success rate was about 70%, which David considered excellent progress for someone who'd started from absolute terror just weeks ago. They walked to the assembly hall together. About 40 people had gathered, more than David expected. He recognized department heads, security personnel, and several civilians who apparently had nothing better to do than watch a traumatized child perform like a trained animal. The thought made his jaw clench. Harris met them at the entrance. Are you both ready? Shira looked at David. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Ready. They took position at the center of the room. David had set up the same metal basin they used in practice, a familiar anchor point for Shira. He explained the demonstration parameters to the audience, keeping his tone professional and matter-of-fact. Shira will produce a controlled flame, maintain it for 5 seconds, and extinguish it intentionally. This demonstrates basic fire control and conscious direction of her natural abilities. Someone in the back muttered something about natural dangers. David ignored it. Shira closed her eyes, following the breathing pattern they'd practiced. David watched her scales shimmer as internal heat gathered. She opened her eyes, focused on the basin, and exhaled. The small flame appeared, steady and controlled. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The audience watched in silence. 4 seconds, 5 seconds. Shira cut off the flow of fire, and the flame disappeared instantly. A few people actually applauded. Harris smiled. David felt tension drain from his shoulders. Then the alarm sounded. The piercing wail of the emergency system filled the hall. Red lights began flashing throughout the station. Every screen switched to display the same message: collision alert. Mining drone malfunction. Impact in 4 minutes. Chaos erupted. People rushed toward exits. Harris's communicator exploded with overlapping voices demanding information and orders. Security tried to maintain order while directing evacuation procedures. David's attention stayed on Shira. She'd frozen completely, eyes locked on the flashing red lights. Her breathing accelerated. Smoke began leaking from her nostrils. Shira, he said urgently, moving to block her view of the lights. Look at me. Just me. But the damage was done. The red emergency lighting, the alarms howl, the panic around them. Every trigger from the colony transport fire activated simultaneously. Shira's careful control shattered. Flames burst from her mouth in uncontrolled spurts. The room's fire suppression system activated immediately, detecting the open flames. Foam sprayed from ceiling nozzles. Automated doors sealed the assembly hall, trapping everyone inside according to safety protocol. David grabbed Shira's shoulders. Breathe. Remember the greenhouse. Remember warmth that helps instead of hurts. You can do this. She couldn't hear him. Lost in trauma response, her body produced fire reflexively while her mind screamed danger. More flames erupted. People backed away, fear replacing their earlier approval. Harris fought through the crowd to reach her communicator panel. Status report. What's happening with that drone? Static, then a response. Mining drone 7 lost navigation control. Current trajectory puts it on collision course with inhabited section B. Impact in 3 minutes. External defense turret is offline. David's mind raced. Section B housed over 200 people. The turret was their primary defense against debris and threats. If it didn't come online, he looked at the control panel near the sealed door. The turret's manual activation was accessible from there, but the access panel was frozen solid. During the cooling system failure last week, ice had formed in the maintenance channels and never fully cleared. Standard cutting equipment was locked in evacuated sections. Then he looked at Shira, flames still bursting uncontrollably from her mouth. An impossible idea formed. Shira, he said loudly, cutting through her panic. I need your help. Right now. People will die if we don't act. Something in his tone reached her. The flames stuttered but didn't stop. Her eyes found his, wild with fear but trying to focus. That panel, he pointed to the frozen access hatch. It's covered in ice. I need controlled heat to melt it without damaging the controls behind it. Your fire can do that. You can save people. I can't control it, she gasped between flame bursts. It just comes out. You did it 3 minutes ago. You held a perfect flame for 5 seconds. You can do it again. Those people need you to do it again. The crowd had gone quiet, listening. Harris pulled up a screen showing the drone's trajectory. 2 minutes until impact. David knelt in front of Shira, his hands on her shoulders. Remember what I said about fire being guided by intention? This is intention. You don't want people to die. Use that feeling. Channel your fire into something that protects instead of destroys. Shira looked at the frozen panel, then back at David. Her breathing slowed fractionally. What if I can't do it precisely enough? Then we fail together. But I don't think we're going to fail. I think you're the bravest person on this station, and you're about to prove it. From somewhere in the crowd, a young voice spoke up. The Centauran boy who'd befriended Shira in the cafeteria stepped forward. I believe you can do it. Others echoed him. Not everyone, but enough. Harris added firmly, 90 seconds. If there's a chance, we take it. David stood and moved to the panel, Shira following. The ice coating was thick, crystalline in the emergency lighting. Behind it, critical controls waited. Steady heat, David instructed, like the grow lamp on the seedlings. Patient, controlled. You got this. Shira positioned herself, closed her eyes for one breath, then opened them with new determination. She exhaled, and this time the flame came out steady and focused. A narrow stream of fire, hot but controlled, directed at the ice. The ice began melting immediately. Water dripped from the melting ice as Shira maintained her focused flame. David watched the panel carefully, calling out adjustments. Lower left corner needs more. Good. Now, ease back on the upper section before it overheats. Shira adjusted without hesitation. Her concentration was absolute, channeling weeks of fear and trauma into precise purpose. The ice continued melting, revealing the access panel beneath. 60 seconds, Harris called out. The last chunk of ice fell away. David yanked open the panel, his fingers flying across the manual controls. The defense turret systems showed offline, but the backup power routing was accessible. He rerouted emergency power, bypassed 3 damaged circuits, and slammed the activation switch. Nothing happened. 45 seconds. David checked connections frantically. There, a corroded relay that hadn't engaged. He needed heat to expand the metal enough to make contact. Shira, smallest flame you can make right here. He pointed to a specific component. She didn't question it. A thin stream of fire, no thicker than his finger, played across the relay. The metal expanded, connection made. Lights flickered green across the panel. Turret active, Harris confirmed. 30 seconds. Targeting drone. The assembly hall's main screen showed the turret swiveling, locking onto the approaching threat. Energy built in the weapon's charging chamber. 20 seconds. 15. The turret fired. The screen showed the mining drone exploding into debris, fragments scattering harmlessly away from the station. Cheers erupted in the assembly hall. David slumped against the wall, exhaustion hitting him like a physical weight. Shira extinguished her flame and stood, breathing hard. Smoke curling from her nostrils, but controlled now. The Centauran boy rushed forward, followed by several others. That was amazing. You saved everyone. Shira looked overwhelmed by the sudden attention. But this time she didn't flee. She accepted the gratitude with small nods, her scales gradually brightening as she realized what she'd accomplished. Harris made her way through the crowd. That was exceptional work. Both of you. She looked at Shira directly. I think we can cancel that transfer order. Anyone who can perform under that much pressure clearly has the control needed for station life. David saw Shira's whole body relax at those words. The medical officer pushed through to examine Shira. Any discomfort? Overheating? No, Shira said aloud, her voice soft but clear. I feel okay. Tired but okay. It was only later, back in their quarters with the temperature finally raised to comfortable levels, that Shira's emotional walls crumbled. She sat on her sleeping platform and cried, great heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. David sat beside her, close enough to offer comfort, but not crowding. It's okay. Let it out. I was so scared, she gasped between sobs. When the alarms went off, all I could see was the colony transport. All I could feel was that helplessness. But then you needed me, and I had to choose. I had to choose between staying scared or helping, and you chose to help. That took incredible courage. But I could have failed. I could have made things worse. But you didn't. You turned your fear into purpose. That's what control really means. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Shira wiped her eyes, scales glistening with tears. My parents used to say that dragon fire is a gift. I never understood what they meant. Fire took them from me. How could it be a gift? David considered his words carefully. Because fire itself isn't good or evil. It's a tool, a force of nature. What matters is how it's used. Today you used it to save lives. Your parents would be incredibly proud. Do you really think so? I know so. They'd see a brave girl who survived something terrible and found a way to turn her pain into protection for others. That's a gift worth having. Shira leaned against David's shoulder, a gesture of trust that would have been impossible weeks ago. Thank you for not giving up on me. For teaching me that fire can warm instead of burn. Thank you for letting me help. For being willing to face your fears even when every part of you wanted to run. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The quarters felt different now, warm and lived in rather than cold and sterile. Shira's scales showed their full color, brilliant purple-silver that caught the light beautifully. Over the following weeks, life on the station settled into a new normal. Shira continued practicing fire control, but now with confidence rather than terror. She could produce flames of varying sizes, maintain them for extended periods, and extinguish them instantly. The greenhouse became her favorite place. She helped David maintain the temperature systems, using her fire to supplement the grow lamps when needed. The plants thrived under her care. The Centauran boy, whose name was Lyle, became her first real friend. He taught her station games and introduced her to other children. Shira taught him about dragon culture and showed him how she could create small sculptures from flame. David submitted his formal guardianship application. Harris approved it without hesitation. The medical officer certified Shira as physically and emotionally healthy, developing normally for a dragon her age. One evening, David found Shira at the observation window again, looking at the stars. But this time her expression wasn't sad. She held a small flame in her palm, shaping it idly as she gazed at her home constellation. Thinking about them, David asked quietly, "Yes, but not just about losing them. About what they taught me before they died. About being brave. About using our gifts to help others. I couldn't understand those lessons then, but I do now." She closed her palm, extinguishing the flame gently. "I want to become the kind of dragon they hoped I'd be. Someone who protects instead of fears. Someone who brings warmth instead of hiding from it." "You already are," David said. "You just needed time to see it yourself." Shira smiled, small wisps of smoke forming heart shapes in the air. "I'm glad I ended up here. With you. This is home now." David felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, it is." They stood together watching the stars, human and dragon, guardian and ward, family built from loss and courage. Somewhere in the distance, grow lamps warmed seedlings in the greenhouse. Throughout the station, systems hummed with carefully controlled heat. And in one small quarters, a young dragon who'd once feared fire now understood its true purpose to T.O. warm. To protect, to help things grow exactly as it should be.